You've heard the names: Billy the Kid, Jesse James, Wyatt Earp, legends whispered in gun smoke and glory. But what if everything you thought you knew about the West's deadliest gunslingers was built on lies? The truth hides behind headlines, tall tales, and Hollywood scripts. The duels, the hats, the heroics. Most of it never happened. These weren't fearless icons. They were flawed men rewritten by time. Let's dig into the 11 myths that turned ordinary men into immortal legends and find out why the truth was never enough. Myth 11. Billy the Kid killed 21 men. You whisper the name and the number follows like thunder. Billy the Kid. 21 men, one for every year he walked this earth. It's 1881 and the Lincoln County War has painted New Mexico in blood. The railroad is coming, the frontier is dying, and the newspapers need a monster to sell papers. They need a demon the public can fear and secretly worship. So they take a skinny, desperate orphan named Henry McCarty, a kid who could barely grow a mustache, and they crown him King of the Graveyard. The myth is perfect, mathematical, poetic, a killer so efficient he averaged one corpse per year since birth. The dime novels devour it. The obituary in the Santa Fe Weekly Democrat makes it gospel. Billy claimed he'd killed a man for every candle on his cake. 21 souls sent screaming into the dark. It's the kind of legend that writes itself, except it's a lie. When you sift through trial records, eyewitness accounts, and coroner reports, the truth emerges like bone through dirt. Billy killed 4 men on his own: Frank Cahill, Joe Grant, and 2 prison guards during his escape. 5 others died in group shootouts where dozens of bullets flew, and no one knows whose lead did the killing. 9 total, maybe. Not 21, not even close. John Wesley Hardin killed over 40, but Billy was just a kid trying to survive who learned too late that legends don't need truth. They need theater. But if Billy's body count was fiction, the most iconic moment in Western history never happened at all. Myth 10. Quick draw. Duels at high noon were common. You stand in the center of town, the sun directly overhead, your shadow a puddle at your boots, your enemy across the dust. Everyone watching. The slow walk, the draw, one shot, one man falls, clean, honorable, fair. It's the golden age of cinema. 1950s, Hollywood needs a symbol, a ritualized dance of violence that separates the righteous from the damned. The Western genre demands structure, order, a moral universe where good and evil settle scores like gentlemen. So directors invent the high noon showdown. They make it sacred. They make it law, and audiences devour it like communion. The quick draw duel becomes America's gladiatorial combat. 2 men, equal footing. May the fastest hand win. It's democracy with gunpowder. It satisfies something primal in us, the belief that skill and courage triumph over chaos. Wild Bill Hickok versus Davis Tutt becomes the template. One documented incident stretched into 1,000 movie scenes. The myth is so powerful, it rewrites history. People start believing it happened every Tuesday. Reality was uglier. Most gunfights were drunken ambushes in saloons, shootouts in the dark, men firing wildly, hitting bystanders, unable to see through black powder smoke who was still standing. It was messy, cowardly, desperate. Quick draw was a rare skill. Only men like Luke Short and John Wesley Hardin could actually do it. The rest, they shot you in the back or waited until you were drunk. They killed from windows, from alleys, from shadows. The myth gave us heroes. The truth gave us murder. And speaking of things Hollywood invented, let's talk about the most iconic piece of cowboy fashion that never was. Before we ride into the next myth, take a second to subscribe. There's a lot more truth hidden beneath the dust, and you don't want to miss what's coming. Myth 9. All cowboys wore iconic Stetson hats. You picture the silhouette, wide brim casting shadow across a weathered face, high crown catching the sun, the cowboy hat, the American crown. It's the 1860s, and John B. Stetson creates the boss of the plains, a practical, durable hat for men working under the unforgiving western sun. But here's the secret: nobody wore them, at least not at first. When you look at actual photographs from the era, you see something Hollywood forgot to mention. The West was won in bowler hats, derby hats, flat caps, military surplus, whatever was cheap, available, and didn't blow off your head in a dust storm. The Stetson was revolutionary in theory, waterproof, breathable, wide enough to shield you from sun and rain. But fashion is about more than function. Cowboys wanted to look respectable, and in the 1870s and 80s, respectable men wore bowlers. Western historian Lucius Beebe called it the hat that won the West. When you examine portraits of Wild Bill Hickok, Wyatt Earp, and Jesse James, there they are, bowlers perched on their heads like English gentlemen. Even early Stetsons looked nothing like modern cowboy hats. They were flat, plain, more Amish than outlaw. The truth is uncomfortable. The authentic cowboy hat you see in every Western is a 20th century fashion statement marketed backward through time. The curled brims, the decorative bands, the theatrical swagger all came later. Cowboys wore what was practical and cheap. Sometimes that was a sombrero, sometimes a Union Army kepi, often a bowler. We traded truth for iconography, and the silhouette won. But while Hollywood dressed the West in fantasy, they also painted it in blood that was never spilled. Myth 8. The Wild West was incredibly violent everywhere. You walk down the street and death walks with you. Every saloon a powder keg, every corner an ambush, every stranger a potential killer. The frontier, where civilization died and chaos reigned eternal. The narrative was seductive. After the Civil War tore America apart, the East needed to believe the West was worse. It justified expansion, militarization, control. Newspapers in New York and Boston painted frontier towns as Sodom and Gomorrah with tumbleweeds. The myth created an entire genre, the Western, a place where violence wasn't just common, it was the primary currency. Every town needed a shootout. Every hero needed a body count. The wilderness became synonymous with barbarism, and Americans ate it up because it made their parlors feel safe. "Thank God we're not out there," they whispered, turning pages drenched in fictional blood. Modern historians pulled the records. Dodge City at its worst averaged 1.5 murders per year. Tombstone, site of the legendary OK Corral gunfight, had fewer homicides annually than modern Dayton, Ohio. Some frontier towns went years without a killing. Why? Because law existed. Sheriffs, marshals, deputy U.S. marshals, layered law enforcement kept order. Most people were farmers, ranchers, families building schools and churches. They were boring, so boring that dime novels had to invent the violence just to stay in business. We built an empire on a myth of chaos. The real West was people trying to survive. The fake West was people trying to sell tickets, and those tickets led to the most dangerous lie of all, that good and evil wore different colored hats. Myth 7. Gunslingers were either outlaws or lawmen. You pin the badge to your chest at dawn and rob a bank at dusk. You murder on Monday and arrest killers on Tuesday. The law, it's whatever the man with the gun says it is. Frontier justice existed in the gray spaces where civilization hadn't quite arrived. Towns were desperate. They needed protection, but couldn't always afford virtue. So they hired men with reputations, men who scared other men. It didn't matter what those men had done last month or where they'd be next month. The myth wanted clean categories, white hats and black hats, heroes and villains, lawmen who upheld justice and outlaws who spat on it. Simple, cinematic, moral. But the frontier wasn't Hollywood. The frontier was Curly Bill Brochus, serving as a deputy before becoming an outlaw. It was Billy the Kid, deputized as a regulator before being hunted. It was Doc Holliday, gambler, killer, addict, sworn in as a lawman by Wyatt Earp after the OK Corral. It was Ben Thompson, convicted murderer, becoming chief of police in Austin, Texas. The truth is uncomfortable. Most gunslingers were mercenaries. They sold violence, to the highest bidder. Sometimes that bidder was a town council, sometimes a cattle baron, sometimes a gang. The law was a costume they wore when convenient and discarded when it wasn't. Towns hired them for their brutality, let them restore order through fear and bullets, then politely asked them to leave before they became the next problem. The cycle repeated endlessly. We wanted knights, we got killers for hire. And sometimes that's all justice ever was. But America needed a hero who stole for the poor. So they invented one out of a cold-blooded murderer. Myth 6. Jesse James was a Robin Hood figure. You rob the railroad baron and give gold to the widow. You terrorize the rich and feed the poor. You're not a criminal. You're a revolution with a revolver. It's a post-Civil War America. The South is broken, bitter, ashes and defeat. Reconstruction crushes former Confederates under Northern heel. Banks foreclose on farms. Railroads steal land. The system is rigged. And into this resentment walks Jesse James, Confederate guerrilla turned outlaw. And the South needs him to be more than a thief. They need him to be revenge in human form. Justice in a world without justice. The legend is perfect propaganda. Jesse doesn't rob, he redistributes. He doesn't murder, he punishes the corrupt. Newspaper editor John Newman Edwards, former Confederate himself, publishes article after article painting Jesse as a folk hero. Jesse plays along, writing letters protesting his innocence, his honor, his noble cause. He becomes America's first media-savvy outlaw. Not one shred of evidence exists that Jesse gave stolen money to anyone but himself. He robbed for profit, he killed witnesses, he murdered guards. He terrorized bank tellers and train passengers. His noble cause was greed wrapped in Confederate flag. But the myth was more useful than truth. It let defeated Southerners feel like they were still fighting. It turned banditry into patriotism. When Robert Ford shot Jesse in the back of the head, his mother carved an epitaph, murdered by a traitor, and coward, not killed, murdered. The myth outlived the man by a century. And if Jesse was Robin Hood, then surely Doc Holliday was the cool, calculating killer with ice in his veins. Myth 5. Doc Holliday was a cool, stoic gunfighter. You watch him stand motionless in the gunfight. No fear, no trembling, ice water for blood, death incarnate in a long coat, the man who never blinked. It's 1880s. America, and tuberculosis is a death sentence. John Henry Holliday earned a dental degree, opened a practice, then started coughing blood. The disease would kill him slowly, but Hollywood needed a legend, a gunman whose nearness to death made him fearless. A man who gambled with bullets because he was already gambling with time. So they invented Doc Holliday, cool, controlled, deadly calm. The myth transforms suffering into strength. Doc becomes the anti-hero we worship. The man too sick to care, too smart to lose, too doomed to fear. He's the gambler who sees through everyone's bluff because he's already holding the losing hand. The tubercular genius who uses his fading breath to deliver perfect one-liners before perfect shots. Val Kilmer gave us I'm Your Huckleberry. History gave us something far messier. The real Doc was a wreck, chronically ill, addicted to laudanum and alcohol. His temper erratic, his hands sometimes shaking. He killed not with precision, but with desperation. The desperation of a man watching his own body betray him. Those who knew him described a brilliant mind drowning in sickness, alcohol, and rage. His reputation came not from skill, but from recklessness. He'd start fights because he had nothing to lose. He sought sulfur springs for healing, and they poisoned him faster. He died at 36, his boots on, in a Colorado sanatorium, probably relieved it was finally over. We needed the myth of the man who conquered death. We got a dentist who death conquered slowly. But if Doc was a myth, his best friend might have been an even bigger lie. Myth 4. Wyatt Earp was always a heroic lawman. You wear the badge like armor. You stand for law, order, justice. You're the white knight of the frontier, and your name is Wyatt Earp. It's the early 1900s and the West is dying. Automobiles replace horses, cities replace camps, and an aging man named Wyatt Earp watches Hollywood start writing his legend. He cooperates, embellishes, edits. By the time he dies in 1929, the myth is set. Wyatt Earp, fearless lawman, hero of Tombstone, the man who brought law to lawlessness. The movies run with it. His legend becomes American gospel. The heroic Wyatt myth satisfies a deep American need, the belief that lone men can stand against chaos and win through virtue alone. Earp becomes the template for every Western hero after him. Shane, the man with no name, every gunslinger with a code. The OK Corral shootout, 30 seconds of panic and smoke, becomes American mythology's Thermopylae. And Wyatt, always Wyatt, the righteous center who never wavered. The real Wyatt was a hustler. After his wife died, he spiraled, arrested multiple times for involvement in prostitution, possibly working as muscle for brothels. He ran cons, gambled, drifted. He pinned on badges in rough towns because it paid, and gave legal cover for his other activities. The OK Corral wasn't heroism. It was a feud between rival gangs, one side wearing badges. Afterward, Wyatt hunted down cowboys and extrajudicial killings. Revenge dressed as law. He lived in that gray space between outlaw and lawman his entire life. We made him pure because we needed purity. The real Wyatt was just a survivor with good publicity. But the biggest lie isn't about what they did, it's about what they were called. Myth 3. The term gunslinger was used in the Old West. You call yourself a gunslinger, and the locals stare at you like you're speaking a language that won't be invented for 50 years. It's 1880 in Dodge City. You're the fastest gun in Kansas. But if someone asks what you do, you don't say gunslinger. That word doesn't exist yet. Won't exist for another 40 years. In fact, most of the vocabulary we associate with the Old West, the mythic language of cowboys and shootouts, was invented by people who never lived it. The term gunslinger appeared in the 1920 movie Drag Harlan. Author Zane Grey popularized it in his 1928 novel Nevada. By the time Hollywood hit its golden age, gunslinger was everywhere, the perfect word. Aggressive, poetic. It sounds like danger and leather and whiskey. It became the official title for every fast-draw killer in cinema history. We retroactively crowned every Old West fighter with a word they'd never heard. The men themselves used different language. Clay Allison called himself a shootist. Others said badman, pistolier, or the Spanish pistolero. Gunfighter emerged in the 1870s, but even that was rare. Most men who lived by the gun didn't call themselves anything. They were just men with guns. The romanticization of the killer, as artist, as specialist, as branded identity, that came from dime novels and Hollywood. The myth renamed history. We speak about the past in a language the past never knew. The word gunslinger is beautiful, it's perfect, and it's completely anachronistic. The frontier never heard it. But now we can't imagine the frontier without it. And just like the words were invented later, so was the wardrobe. Myth 2. Gunslingers wore low slung. Gunfighters' rigs. You strap the holster low on your thigh, tie it down with rawhide. The gun sits exactly where your hand naturally falls. Fast draw physics, the rig that made you lethal. It's 1950s Hollywood, and directors need visual language, something that separates the killer from the civilian, something threatening, masculine, iconic. So costume designers invent the low-slung, thigh-tied gunfighter's rig, a setup that looks fast and deadly on camera. Actors like John Wayne and Clint Eastwood wear them. A generation of Western films cements the image. The rig becomes synonymous with the gunslinger himself. You see the low holster, you know someone's about to die. The myth solves a cinematic problem. How do you show danger before the gun is drawn? The rig does it. It's threatening in stillness, it promises violence, and it looks incredible on film. The gun riding low, the tied down holster, the hand hovering. Directors milk every frame. The rig becomes shorthand. This man is a professional killer. Nobody in the actual Old West wore them. The low-slung rig is terrible for practicality. Try riding a horse with a gun flopping against your leg. Try sitting down. Try walking fast. The setup is uncomfortable, impractical, and unnecessary. Real gunfighters wore their holsters high on the hip or in shoulder rigs. Wild Bill Hickok used butt-forward holsters for horseback access. Quick draw was rare. Most men killed from ambush or close quarters where speed didn't matter. The fancy rigs were invented for Hollywood, then written backward into history as authentic. The prop became the icon. We remember the costume, not the truth. But the greatest lie isn't about a weapon, a word, or a holster. It's about time itself. Myth 1. The Wild West era. Lasted for generations. You've lived your whole life in the Wild West. Your father lived in it. Your grandfather lived in it. It's eternal. America's forever frontier. We imagine the Wild West as an age, an epoch, a multi-generational saga of cowboys and gunslingers that defined American identity for decades, maybe a century. Hollywood films set in the Old West span from the 1860s to the 1910s as if it's all one continuous era. The myth serves American identity. It gives us a founding mythology, a crucible where the nation was forged through violence and individualism. The longer the era, the more important it seems. The more justified the violence, the more epic the story. So we stretch it. Make it generational. Let it bleed across decades. The Wild West becomes America's Iliad, a war that shaped everything after it. The truth is almost insulting in its brevity. The classic Wild West, cowboys, gunslingers, frontier towns, lawless violence, lasted roughly 20 to 30 years. From the end of the Civil War in 1865 to the early 1890s. That's it. One generation, shorter than a career. The railroad came. Telegraph lines connected cities. Statehood brought law. By the 1890s, the frontier was functionally closed. Wyatt Earp lived to see automobiles and Hollywood. The gap between Wild West and World War I is shorter than the gap between World War II and today. We stretched 20 years into mythology. So, how many of these myths did you believe? The Wild West wasn't a place of heroes and villains. It was a stage where truth got rewritten to sell legends. If you love peeling back history's curtain, subscribe for more deep dives into the stories behind the stories. Until next time, keep your facts sharp and your legends in check.